AFC implications, obviously, and not to be insensitive about it, but I mean, it does. It's the realistic part of this storyline as it pertains to the Patriots. And I would just say from the start, the NFL, as usual, has handled this extremely poorly. A lot of people, other than myself, have tweeted out that obviously it's much different than the way the NFL handled the Tom Brady football situation. Yep. They didn't even bother to interview Kareem Hunt when they were looking into this situation, which is frustrating, I think, for multiple different reasons. But Zach, I just want to get your take on it first.
Yeah, I mean, the first take has to be the one that you just mentioned, that the NFL just can't seem to get out of its own way in any of these situations. Unfortunately, they have had a lot of similar situations like this over the last couple of years, and it seems like every time Roger Goodell comes out and says, we're going to learn from this, we're going to treat this differently next time, and then they end up basically treating it the exact same the next time. It's something has to change in this league. Something has to change with the way that it handles these kind of situations. But I mean, on a purely football level, I mean, it does shake up the AFC playoff picture, because if Patriots win today against the Vikings, Chiefs lose today against the Raiders, Patriots are back in first place in the AFC.
Yeah, and this has always been my biggest gripe, and why I'm glad you bring this up, Doug. I think there is nothing more important in the NFL than who plays. And when we do segments here in the middle of October, then in November, and now even early December, if we want to have a conversation about who's going to win where, you need to tell me who's playing. And really, who plays matters on who wins, as much as anything out there. Certainly not the air pressure in a ball. Certainly not, any of the other things that you could possibly hypothetically put out there that affects the outcome of a game. It's who plays. And when it's an all-pro running back, that's a really big deal. Mm-hmm. So to sort of close out this point and get to Viking stuff, why I think that matters is because I think it affects the integrity of all those games that guy participated in, that otherwise wouldn't have been on the field if this was done correctly. I don't think you can retroactively put in a rule now that simply wipes away the games that he played in that he should not have been playing in. But we know that college basketball does do that. They'll go away and take away championships. They'll go away and take away things where you had an ineligible player that was involved that should not have been. Now, the league's not going to do that because they actually play a role in this. They are part of the half-assing as much as the Chiefs are. But to me, that needs to be the new rule. The new rule needs to be that if you withheld information, you weren't diligent in getting information, and you kept a guy out on the field that shouldn't have been there, the Patriots wouldn't have a gripe. This isn't a Patriots point at all. Think of those other games the Chiefs have played up until that point, maybe a closer game with the Steelers or whoever it is that they played. If they were in these close games and the absence or inclusion of that all-pro player could have swung the outcome, the game's in question. There's no integrity to it. So I think that the way to dissuade nonsense like this, it isn't statements, it's not recommitment to domestic, it's not that. It's threats. And it's threats with football, and it's threats that you're going to lose. Because that's all that registers with these people. You're not going to get at their heart, all right? You're going to get at the integrity of the football stuff.
And if Kareem Hunt's stats were taken away from that Patriots game, Jason McCourty's coverage stats would look a lot better this season as well. But as you can probably tell, it's raining out here. We're not in our usual suits like usual because we are getting soaking wet out here. Matt's got his old school football helmet on there. He's
knit leather helmet, if that makes any sense.
But since it is raining, could be some more running in this game than usual. It might not. Teams might be hesitant to pass. I don't know if Tom Brady would be, but the Vikings might be. But definitely, run game is a big part of this game for the Patriots because Rex Burkhead is expected back on the field this week. Yeah. He was activated off of injured reserve this week. He's been on it since week 3. He was dealing with concussion and neck issues, and I think that he is going to be a very important part of this offense moving forward. I don't think he's get cut too heavily into either Sony Michel or James White snaps. I think that Michel will still be the bell cow running back. I think James White's still going to be the third down back. But Rex Burkhead definitely adds more unpredictability to the Patriots offense because he is solid in the run game. He's solid in the pass game. Sony Michel, usually when he's on the field, Patriots run the ball 78% of the time. James White, when he's on the field, Patriots pass the ball 73% of the time. Rex Burkhead last year, it was a 65-35 split, which I know that might not seem like much, that 8 percentage points. Yeah. It matters big time. And for opposing defenses, when he's in the backfield, they don't know if they're going to run or pass.
So two sides of this for me. I think the really important thing here to hit on is the history of this team when they get an old face back. They're not big on throwing a 30-rep guy out there anyway. I mean, even Gronk, even if we were talking about Julian Edelman, that first day back is not going to be a high-inclusion, high-target game. It's going to work your way into the system. And we have to sort of, in my view, kind of talk about the other half, which is an uncomfortable thing. We're certainly not wishing this upon the guy, but the reality of it is the guy that he'll be buffering is a guy with an injury scare. Virtually every other week he's out there. So Sony Michel gets bent over back last week, and my first thought is, well, A, thank God that he's okay, and then B, my God, they need insurance. So this could not be more timely to get Rex back. And again, in fairness on that same issue, Rex has had an issue staying healthy as well. So what these guys do, in my view, is serve as insurance for one another. You have two guys that can do somewhat similar things. Doug makes a great point that Sony hasn't been largely involved in the pass game, but I will counter that slightly in that he did get a couple targets in the pass game last week. I think they're starting to work him into that to try to chip away at those keys so they're not so strong. But really, I think it's going to be important that you have Rex because of what Sony, the style that he runs. He's a young guy. You're going to learn your way to kind of avoid some of these injuries. He's not quite there yet. But the three-headed monster of those two, and then plus James White, who's phenomenal, is more than enough to get it done. But I think you need all three just for insurance purposes.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to see from Rex Burkhead in this game, or even really going forward, because I think it's important to remember that in the last two games before he suffered this injury that landed him on IR, he was hardly seeing the field, really.
Yeah. Did he not have the head?
He had a concussion in one, then the neck.
Yeah.
And even when he was healthy early in that Week 2 game, really wasn't that much of a factor in the offense. But I think the biggest thing is the unpredictability thing that Doug mentioned. Yeah. The fact that he's really the best kind of dual threat running back that the Patriots have right now. I do think that Sony Michel can get there later in his career. And like you said, we have been seeing him used a little bit more in the passing game of late. But right now, the best running back that's a rushing and a pass-catching threat, that would be Rex Burkhead. So I think he'll definitely get some opportunities today.
Another name just to throw in the mix, since they are playing the Vikings today, is Cordell Patterson.
You did it! There you go. I love it.
Yeah.
Might play defensive end, quarterback.
He wants to play quarterback, safety, defensive end.
And he can pass.
He's going to take the play card from Bill, and he's going to start calling plays. He wants to do it all, folks.
This is a big Cordell Patterson week this week.
It was a big Cordell Patterson week because Mike Zimmer, the Vikings head coach, said that the Patriots have actually used him better than the Vikings did, which I think they have as well. Maybe we see a couple running back snaps from him just to throw that in the mix a little bit. But let's stay on offense with Rob Gronkowski, who returned to action last week. I predicted last week that he would look like 100% Rob Gronkowski. Wasn't quite the case, but he did have the big touchdown, did show glimmers of looking like himself. A couple times this week he was removed from the injury report, so I'm doubling down. I think he's going to look fully like himself again this week. And I don't know, I think at some point we are going to see, the 7-catch, 100-yard touchdown game for Rob Gronkowski, and it very well could be this week for me.
Yeah, I think so as well. Rob Gronkowski, he was solid against the Jets last week. Jamal Adams actually did a pretty good job of locking him down throughout most of that game, but he did get back in the end zone. He did have another 15-plus yard catch, and even when he's just on the field, it really changes the entire Patriots offense.
That's it.
I actually think that this could be a big week for him because the Vikings, while their defense is very solid, one of the NFL's better defenses, we'll get into them a little bit more later. They're 27th in DVOA against tight ends in the passing game. So it's a complicated stat. Shout out to Robert Mays and Kevin Clark from The Ringer who brought that to my attention. But that means they've been one of the worst teams in the NFL at defending tight ends. And on that same note, they're also one of the worst teams in the NFL at defending running backs in the passing game. James White, Rob Gronkowski. Yes. That's not really the matchup you want to see if you're Minnesota.
So here's the thing that jumped out to me the most. I wrote about this week on The Athletic. I wanted to go back and look at Rob's snaps, all of his snaps, and not just because it's something we say. I say it. I'm as guilty as this as anyone, and we all say it throughout this market. Rob still helps the team when he's there, even if he's not catching balls. Yeah. It's the theory. It's what we believe. It is true. But how is it true? And that was really important to me. I think there's a perception out there that he gets doubled so other people get open otherwise than they would. Not really the case. It's sometimes the case. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the help player will follow him. Sometimes he gets a true double. But more often than not, and in a situation like this with me and the guys here, we're not going to be able to illustrate this, but you kind of have to take my word for it or go check out that column. What happens a lot of times is when they make a decision to cover someone with someone other than you would traditionally cover, if they were showing you the exact same formation and it was a different guy standing where Rob was, the decision to take Jamal Adams and chase him around, because they're going to use Adams on him, it not only changes what the coverage is doing behind it, it changes the run fits of the run front. Because now the safety who would have filled at another spot is going to fill at a different area. There's a vacancy. You can go back to Sony Michel's closing run there in the fourth quarter. Adams has chased Gronk all the way across the formation, dove into the line, and Michel cuts back to the safety vacancy. That happens because Rob's on the field. If that's Dwayne Allen or really any other tight end in the league that's trading, they don't adjust that way. Yeah. So there's a real, tangible effect to having Rob Gronkowski back. The other one that's really, hey, lights, folks, that wasn't God, that was Gillette. So the other one that really jumps out, and it's easy to see if you go back and check this out on NFL Game Pass or maybe go look on highlights on YouTube or something like that. But Julian Edelman's big run in the first half. Julian Edelman gets open on a low crossing route. Now, the way Julian was covered on that play would not change if Rob was in the game or not. Rob was there. He got one-on-one across the low area. There's free players at linebacker. That's Julian beating his guy. Julian's going to beat his guy one way or the other. Double or not wouldn't have mattered. What mattered is as Gronk ran his route, a deep crosser behind it, Adams chased him. So it wouldn't have affected whether or not he caught it. What's the effect is that once he caught it, there's less tacklers. So on the back end, that tackling safety who would have been in the seam on that other side, who would have tackled Julian for 8 yards, maybe 10 yards, isn't there because he's chasing the guy who's not getting the ball. And then Julian goes for 35 or whatever it was. So it's real. And so the really important thing here to understand is that the box score tells a little bit of a lie about the kind of game the guy had. A lot of the big runs followed Rob. He was dominant against the Jets, but his box score wasn't.
Yeah, and a good stat from one of our producer, Fred Nutter, who says that Patriots have only had Gronk, Edelman, and Brady on the field for, I think it's 18 of their last 60 games, and in their last 20 games together, the Patriots are 19-1. So Patriots certainly have a good chance here with all three of those guys healthy.
Sure.
But let's flip the script a little bit to the defensive side of the ball, because the Vikings have maybe the best 1-2 combo in the NFL, wide receiver. We don't know if Stephon Diggs is going to be playing this game. We just saw him working out there behind us. He was a game-time decision. But if he plays, if Adam Thielen plays, there's definitely a question as to how the Patriots line up against these guys. Do they shadow one of them with Stephon Gilmore? And if they do, is it going to be Diggs? Is it going to be Thielen? Personally, I would cover Diggs with Gilmore. I would leave Adam Thielen on Jason McCourty with some help maybe, and then on that number 3 wide receiver, whether it's Laquan Treadwell or Aldrick Robinson, I would actually play J.C. Jackson rather than having Jonathan Jones as that number 3 cornerback, because Jones is the slot guy. I don't like the matchup there with Jones and Thielen, so I would actually have this be a big J.C. Jackson game personally as that number 3 corner.
Yeah, I think you're going to see one of those 2 starting cornerbacks slide into the slot to follow Adam Thielen around when he goes in there, just because this guy is so dynamic. He's legitimately one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He's reached that level. He leads the league in catches, has 100 or more yards in, 9 of Minnesota's 11 games this season. He's too dangerous to stick a guy like Jonathan Jones on him. Even though Jonathan Jones has had some moments this season, really struggled last week, got benched for J.C. Jackson. So I think you're going to see one of those 2 starters in there in the slot. And then you probably see J.C. Jackson over on the outside, because Jonathan Jones doesn't really play on the outside. Duke Dawson, who was a healthy scratch last week, he doesn't really play on the outside, so might not be a big game for either of them. You could be looking at J.C. Jackson to really kind of lock down whoever's not covering Adam Thielen. The Minnesota can do some creative things to get some mismatches in there.
Yeah, and one of the things to sort of think about with Minnesota, and I always like to say this off the top because I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I play fantasy football. I know you guys both play fantasy football. I know most of the people watching probably play fantasy football. Thielen, very productive, big name. Diggs, very productive, big name. Even at the tight end position, pretty good sized name.
Kyle Rudolph,
guy that people know. That said, even with those guys, and even as productive as they are, it's still a mid-20s offense. This is not an over. So my point in saying that is you don't do something out of character to take away one guy from what would most likely be fantasy production as opposed to overall production of the group. And that to me is important because I kind of look at Diggs and Thielen as awfully comparable. Not putting one against each other, not different body types, not even markedly different skill sets necessarily. And if you're curious out there, we got some time before the 425 game, go back to my Twitter feed at Chatham58. I tweeted out a couple routes that they like to do, that the Vikings like to do, where they isolate both of these guys on the backside of 3-by-1. And what that means is you get 3 receivers to one side, 1 receiver to the other side. And the rationale for doing that, and literally putting both guys in the same position in different formations. So they're willing to put Thielen there just as much as they're willing to put Diggs there. And the reason they do that is you try to put other receivers, more eligibles, into a spot, maybe even run fake towards the more eligibles to draw all your attention over there to put that dude on an island. So in my view, it would be very difficult to just chase Stephon Gilmore with either of the 2 because you may end up in a situation where you don't need him. You don't want Gilmore in a bunch necessarily. It might be great to have him ISO wherever it is. It might be either guy. It's more important. I just think the important thing is, and this is actually something that a lot of teams have done against them, and it's probably the safest and most, savvy approach with them. Put your best guy on the one that you want to take, and it really can be either one. And you need to be competitive. You won't win all of them because he's good too, but the other one needs help, right? So if you're not giving Gilmore to Diggs, then Diggs takes your other guy with help, and then you let him take Thielen. But if you want to do it the other way around, you're justified in doing that as well. And I think from there, you're going to have mixed coverages from their zone stuff anyway and the way you pressure, but I just don't think you oversell yourself on either. They're probably both going to get their meals, so I just think that with a note
I think
of
it also
caution.
goes without saying that if Stephon Diggs is not active for this game, that is a very big win for the Patriots, because then you're looking at guys like Laquan Treadwell, Aldrick Robinson down on that depth chart, who definitely don't scare you nearly as much as those top two.
Don Beebe's son. And the Patriots actually did show a pretty big willingness to put Jason McCourty in the slot last week. That wasn't something that he really did much in his career at all with the Titans or the Browns, but he was really getting a lot of slot snaps last week, so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. Let's throw to our 4-1-1. That is Ben Lieber, who's going to be talking about Sebastian Thunderbuckets. He's
Thunderbuckets.
He's not on your Vikings game day roster, but you will understand what you're talking about.
You're going to love this segment, folks.
So one guy that deserves a lot more credit is Tom Johnson, or a.k.a. Sebastian Thunderbucket. That's right, Sebastian Thunderbucket. Who wants to talk about a boring name like Tom Johnson when you could have a name like Sebastian Thunderbucket? That's at least what we call him around here. He's been a heck of a player. He's a part of that defensive line rotation. He came to the Vikings a few years ago and really took off. Like, for whatever reason, just fits in this scheme, in this system. Andre Patterson, the defensive line coach, has done something special with him. The Vikings got rid of him in the offseason. He signed with Seattle. Seattle cut him many weeks ago, and the Vikings brought him back, and he's just, again, taking off where he left off, which is a really good rotational three technique for this team. So you got to watch out, because you don't get a lot of breaks when the starters come out, because a guy like Sebastian Thunderbucket is going to come and hit you right in the face.
So Tom Johnson, that's what the Patriots have to watch out for, according to Ben Lieber, and that'll be the responsibility of, David Andrews, Joe Thuney, Shaq Mason. Patriots have been extremely solid there in the middle of their offensive line, especially with Shaq Mason back on the field.
It's funny that each time we do these 4-1-1s, the guy that's often overlooked is the non-stat 3 technique.
Right.
There's a lot of these teams that revert to that kind of guy because they're not going to be pumped up. It's like the Adam Butlers of this kind of place. It's like you're not going to know that name, but they end up making a play or two or three and mattering. On a side personal note here, Ben Lieber, the guy you're talking about here, this is the younger brother of my running back at the University of South Dakota, Jason Lieber, stud for us back as a Coyote. Ben was a stud, great player in the NFL as well. He's going to be out here today on the sideline for the Vikings. The Vikings actually use an in-game sideline analyst as part of the radio broadcast. So screw you, Ben. You got to stand under the rain and get wet all day. No, I love the guy. He did awesome stuff for us. Now, Ben's got some stuff also, Doug, here on what now?
Yeah, he's going to be talking about a weakness of the Vikings, and that is, unsurprisingly, their running game so far this season. Let's throw that.
One of the biggest weaknesses for this Vikings team is the lack of run game. It just hasn't been there. It hasn't been consistent. Situational football has not been good, and it's been like that from the start of the season. I think everybody thought with John DeFilippo coming from Philadelphia and their good run game that we'd just take off with Dalvin Cook. Now, Dalvin's been injured for most of the season with a hamstring injury, so that's taken a big hit. And Latavius Murray is not exactly a game breaker. He's more of a grinder. So now that Dalvin's back, we've been expecting the run game to pick up, but I think the way this offensive line is constructed, it's much more of a athletic, leaner, thinner line. They don't recreate a new line of scrimmage. They don't get a lot of push. They're not super physical. So that's one area that has to pick up.
Since Dalvin Cook is kind of a big fantasy name, speaking of fantasy, there are some people out there who probably don't know that he's struggled so far this season, but I believe he's only averaging 3.2 yards per carry. He really hasn't put together a solid game so far for the Vikings. The Patriots' run defense it's been a little spotty, but you would think that they would be able to handle a guy like Cook as long as he doesn't come out here and have his best game of the season.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook still hasn't really developed into the kind of player that the Vikings surely wanted him to be when they drafted him so high last year. Obviously, still very early in his career, missed almost all of last season, has missed a lot of time this season too, but yeah, like you said, he's only averaging 3.2 yards per rush, and that's with a 70-yard run added in there. Take out that 70-yard run, 2.5 yards per carry this season. That's not going to get it done.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say about Dalvin Cook, and going back and watching this guy, he is explosive. He has not put it together for full games. So, and I think there's a frustration, and you heard that from sort of Ben's comments, that there hasn't necessarily been a commitment to him. So you can go back, I believe it was a swing pass against the Packers where they throw it out to him in the flat. He's unaccounted for as he gets out. He gets in space. He blows through secondary. He looks exceptional.
Made some plays in the receiving game.
Yeah,
so
and
far.
you're sitting here thinking, oh man, this guy's a big part of what they do. Then you flip back to the box score, it's like, oh, they don't use him that much. So I think it's one of those situations where you don't want to sleep on a guy. You can go back to the Jacksonville game. It hasn't been a big Corey Grant season, but he had a big day that day, right? Yeah. So you don't want to sleep on a guy that might be coming out of the backfield. You're going to chip him with the ends. Dalvin Cook should not be running around free. And then also, Latavius Murray is very similar in that Latavius he's not going to get 1,000 yards this season, but you can go back and pick a few games where they did rely upon him and they were very good for them, and that's probably a frustration coming from a Vikes point of view. So from Minnie's side of it, they want them to commit to those guys, and you don't say they suck because the box score doesn't say as much. They've just had a real difficult time committing to them, but he can be a 100-yard guy if you let him go. He's a big body. I've used the example with Cordarrelle Patterson throughout the year. Cordarrelle and Latavius Murray have almost identical bodies. It's one of the taller backs in the league. But if they're not going to rely upon him, they're bailing the Patriots out.
Yeah, fast too. And not quite as fast as Cordarrelle, but definitely a fast running back. Let's get into our keys of the week. As usual, I'll go last, get you guys to get the keys out of the way first. Matt, I'll throw to you first. What are your keys of the game in this one?
We'll go offense first. So offensively, I think one of the things that in watching film that was really available there, but that's, again, not going to show up in a stat ranking, the Vikings rank pretty high as far as run defense. But I think there are kinds of runs they're not as good at. And because they're such an aggressive, fast flow defense, really athletic at the linebacker group, pretty athletic front up as well, good safeties that tackle well, but a safety's always going to be late. It's the cutback runs. What cutback runs mean, we've designed a play here that's going to go behind Doug. Doug's the point of attack. We want Sony to run behind Doug. And we want the back to go that way because we want the defense to flow with them. The cutback is over here. It's send it there and then end up behind it. Cutback runs have been the one thing. Aaron Jones has been good at it in the Packers game, and it was something the Packers fans were pretty upset about. Really good at it for a half, and they didn't stick with it. So it's not don't run against them. It's the kind of runs and where you're more likely to win. So there has to be that running game there. I think the Patriots have established very well, indisputably, that they are a markedly different team when they do it, and they're not quite the same when they don't. And that doesn't mean that you run right into the teeth of what they do best. You may need to spread them to run. You may need to do other things to get it, but you can't abandon it. That has to be a part of it. Let's go through just offense here and stick with that.
Well, for my offense was actually that exact same thing. They need to get their running game going. When they've had their running game going this year, when they've rushed for 93 or more yards, they're 7-0. When they've rushed for 93 or fewer yards, they're 1-3. And the only one in there was that game against the Buffalo Bills where they were just kind of a mess. So they need to kind of establish the run, which obviously opens up everything else for this offense. It's not going to be easy to do against this Vikings team. I believe they're third in the league in yards per carry allowed, tied for fourth in yards per game allowed. So they have a stout run defense in there, but that's really been kind of the key to the Patriots offense this season has been getting a strong running game.
I'll go with Gronk in this one. I think that, like I've been pounding for a couple of weeks now, and then even before the bye week, they need to get Gronk going, and they need to prove to people that he can still be the Gronk. And I think that this is the game to do it. As you were saying earlier, Vikings DVOA is very high, I guess, or very low. I forgot which one I would go with. Against running backs and tight ends, I think this could be the game that he kind of goes off, and I think that would certainly help the offense quite a bit and prove to future defenses that Gronk can still be that threat that he's been in previous years. So let's go the defense now.
Yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, I think one of the things, and this is kind of trying to give the folks at home a little bit of insight to how game planning is done in the NFL, especially with the organization I know best. It's not trying to find, some massive thing to make them be an outlier. In other words, it's not trying to be like, well, they normally score 25 a game. How can we put a plan together to make them score 10? You're not going to be able to move the dial that much on the team. And I think this team is a solid offense, pretty good skill group, comparable a little bit to Detroit. You look at that game, it's going to have a bad memory for people, but a pretty good trifecta of receivers. You'll remember with Marvin Jones Jr., Galladay, and then Golden Tate. That was a pretty good three with a pretty good quarterback. This is very similar to that, except it's the tight end that's more involved with the two wide receivers. But they got a pretty good threesome as well, and then backs that are reactive, and a good quarterback. Not a great quarterback, but a good quarterback. A quarterback you can win with. So in games like that, there's not a definitive, we got to take this away to win. That's not what they believe, because you can't oversell anything to sort of get yourself out of your own MO. What you do is you go through and scout, here's what this guy does. Don't give away freebies to Dalvin Cook in the flat, that kind of thing. Don't give away shot plays to Stephon Diggs as an extended player. There's a reason they put these guys in these positions. There's certain things, and we're not going to be able to run through them all here, but certain things you have to take away with Thielen. He's going to make plays, but you can't allow X. There's certain things Diggs does, you can't allow that. In the red zone, they love to go to this. And you can't, so really that's how you break down this kind of team. At the end of the day, they're not going to score 40. They're most likely not even going to score 30. So you want to keep them in their wheelhouse, pull it down by doing the things that are most important to take away what they do best.
Yeah, I agree. For my keys for this game is everybody, if you've watched any Vikings highlights this season, you've seen Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen making these kind of ridiculous leaping catches 40 yards down the field.
Yeah.
Patriots can't have those.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins loves to dink and dunk. He ranks pretty low. I think he's something like 30th in the NFL in average yards per completion. So he's a dink and dunk kind of guy. The Patriots are fine against dink and dunk kind of quarterbacks. They'll gladly let a team kind of drive, take an 11-yard drive down the field, take up 6 minutes off the clock, and then kick a field goal. Patriots have lived on that for years now. I think as long as they take away those big monster chunk plays, like you were saying, to Thielen and Diggs and Kyle Rudolph, I think this defense will be okay.
Mine's also Kirk Cousins related. Kirk Cousins, obviously the completion percentage is high, but as you said, yards per completion, yards per attempt are low. He's also willing to eat sacks, whereas Tom Brady might throw the ball away.
There it is, yes.
Kirk Cousins is eating sacks, so I think that if you get pressure after Kirk Cousins, which Patriots have done well this season, but only when they make opposing offenses one-dimensional. That's when the pass rush really comes, when they get out to early leads, when they force the opposing team to be throwing the ball rather than running the ball. That's when they're really able to get the pressure. So if the Patriots can get off to an early lead and get some pressure after Kirk Cousins, he's going to be willing to go down because he doesn't want to throw those incompletions. He doesn't want to throw the ball away like Tom Brady will. So I think that's really where you get them. Then you get them into those second and third and long situations, and that's really where you can get the Vikings to come off the field, obviously, in either punts or maybe force a turnover in that situation. But, yeah, definitely get the pressure because Kirk Cousins definitely eats a lot of sacks. I know that you can blame that on the offensive line to some regard, but actually Vikings offensive line doesn't give him – they give him a decent amount of time to throw the ball. His average time per sack is about middle of the pack as far as the NFL goes. I think he's 14th, 2.66 yards per sack, something like that. So
it's not like he's getting run over right after the snap.
Right, it's not like it's like a disaster up there. The Vikings offensive line is bad, but it's not all to blame on them.
Well, and the one way to affect that number the most is to run the football. If you want to give the guy more time, you start relenting in the stopping of Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook. Then you can sit back there all day because you have legitimate and/or play action. If you don't have that, and the Patriots get to sit back and just pen their ears back, that changes things dramatically. And again, it's no different for the Vikings than it really is the Patriots. So final segment here, Doug. What do we got?
Let's get into the Chatham's Choice right here real quick. Patriots are favored by 5 points in this game. Since it is the Chatham's Choice, we'll throw to you first, Matt, on this one.
Well, guys, one of the things that we've been really starting to beat around as we've done this throughout the year is trying to not necessarily make the right choice for you, but first we got to be in the right area, right? We're always having a decision about whether or not I go with the spread or whether or not to go with the points. We're 9-2 on the year if you followed me. So I went in on whatever it is you're buying your wives or boyfriends or husbands for Christmas because played a big role in that. But jokingly, though, I think this is a game where I'm a little bit scared about the points, higher or low. I really, game theme is a little bit hard to predict with the conditions here. We're told it's going to stop raining. We expect it'll stop raining. But all of a sudden this thing comes out and ends up being 20-13 because of this. I wouldn't be surprised. With that, it dries out. Diggs is full speed, has a game like we expect. The Patriots are complete full healthy, and they score 40. Wouldn't be surprised with that either. Right. And on days like that where I think it's just so wild left and right, I don't love betting points, so I don't like to send you guys down that road. What I will do is say this is a 6-4-1 team. 6-4-1. They're on the road here. Look around. 6-4-1 teams with lines that are under a score. You jump all over that. Yeah. You send your kids college tuition on that. And if you lose, you don't talk to me. Zach said it, not me. Kiddingly, though, in weeks where it was 4.5 when the week started, it's up to 5 now. Those are the kind of ones you jump on those feet first every single time. 5 is a very safe number. If we were talking 7, 8, or 9, we'd have a conversation. But I think this is going to be a competitive game, but 5 is too tight in this place.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think the Patriots at home, 5-point favorites. Looking at the Vikings, even if Stephon Diggs plays, you never know if he's going to be 100%. Yep. Even if Xavier Rhodes, who we didn't talk about at all, they're all-pro cornerback, he's also supposed to be a game-time decision in this. He might not be 100%. You can see kind of a similar situation to what happened in Chicago, where Khalil Mack played, but he wasn't Khalil Mack. I don't know. I say Patriots by over a touchdown in this game.
Yeah, I'm going with you guys. And I don't know about you guys, but I plan to send my 1-year-old to a state school. I plan on sending her,
that mass tuition
thing,
right?
Absolutely, mass tuition. She's going to get a lot of scholarships. So I'll throw her college tuition on Patriots favored by 5 because, like you said, 6-4-1. I do think the Patriots are able to win big in this game, especially with Diggs and Rhodes kind of questionable for this game. We don't know, even if they do play, how good they're going to be in this game.
One going away point that I want to make to folks out there, because I know there's a sentiment out there, and it's understandable from the Jets game. There's a frustration of playing a division team, being a little bit ugly at a couple first half drives, ending up in a tie with a team that you don't have a ton of respect for because they haven't been good this season. There was I believe, season low, or it was awful low, number of possessions in that game, which drives the final point total. I believe it was only 10 total possessions on the game. Patriots end up in a 2-score win on the road in the division. And one thing just to sort of keep in mind when we do that, I thought that was a damn good game. What they blew it is on red zone possessions. They were only they missed on two.
One for three, I believe.
Yeah, they went to 2 fade situations with Gronk. If there's one thing I want to see them go away from, I want to see less of that. But in saying that, if you're out there and you're thinking about gambling, or you just simply want to watch this game and enjoy it like most fans do, remember, it isn't always just about the helmet sticker and maybe a recollection of a team. We saw the Packers. We built them up. We did a fun show here, guys. But the Packers aren't quite what you recall. And if you think of the Vikings, I got a lot of respect for them. I think that's a good organization. I feel pretty good about Zimmer, much like Coach Belichick does. But 6-4-1, and that defense, it's not the same as last year. Last year, there was a very near Super Bowl team, and the defense is down a notch for them. It's still good, still deserve respect, but the Patriots, this isn't last year's Patriots team, but this isn't last year's Vikings team either.
All right, good stuff, guys, here. Keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow Matt at Chatham58, Zach at Zack Cox, NESN on Twitter, me at Doug Kyed on Twitter, and we will catch you guys next week when the Patriots take on the Dolphins.